A very warm welcome to Kappa Sports Sunday Night Special. We are going to look off the sports fields today, off the court, off the ring, out of the ring, basically out of our minds at this stage, because there's been so much going on that defies belief, defies logic, and basically defies humanity, and actually also defies fascism and racism and anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and the whole range of isms that basically make us feel a little bit better about ourselves as human beings. So we're going to start off talking about one issue that is now closed for the moment. It's a couple of weeks old, but we left it aside to let it marinate, let it settle, let it grow, let it resonate within our hearts, because it was something that was very important to us, of course. But all the time here, of course, based in not just in Russia, but in the world. And we're going to speak about Russia's basically abortive return to the global game. Then we'll have a look at what's been happening in Palestine, not a deep dive into Palestine. I'm going to look at some of the reactions, but especially the ones from Glasgow Celtic, and a little mention for Liverpool FC as well. So there's a kind of an interesting story there as well. And then finally, we're going to have a look back at the passing of a legend. Quite a few well-connected, well-known football people, including Bill Crenwright, the former head man in Everton, have passed away recently. Do also have to mention the death of an ice hockey player on the ice in England. Yes, we'll speak more about that in just a moment. A horrible situation. We're not going to play the video because it's not about demonetization. It's just a horrible, horrible thing that, you know, you see something that happens when someone skates across a player's neck and they later on die. So it's a horrible feeling as an athlete. And anyone who's ever skated or played ice hockey, you'll know the fears when you come to the ice, because it's always there at the back of your mind. It always, always is there, even if you're at an ice rink with your kids. And of course, the passing of Bobby Charlton, we'll speak about that at the very end of the show. We have a nice little package for that as well, thanks to FIFA TV. But we'll start off straight away with a story, a situation that gave a little bit of hope, asked a lot of questions, and ended up slamming shut on everybody's fingers and basically slamming shut on common sense. Bringing straight in my co-host, Andrew Flint. Andrew, straight away, the whole story is this: that last year, when Russia, of course, was banned, we were live on the air when the announcements were coming through. Yeah. We knew what was happening. It was very difficult. We actually had football people, and I say football people, but basically people who were working in football in Russia. Of course, Alexander Zotov, who at the time was the head of the Football Players Union of Russia, and he was with us live in the air when this was all being announced. It was very, very difficult for us to take in, because we were thinking, how is this going to work out? We all made peace with ourselves that it was the right thing to do for the safety of players, the safety of fans, the safety of officials, and the safety of the game itself. Because we've seen, as time has passed, the crazies take over the dialogue, or it's not a dialogue, it's basically their monologues. We've seen the insane people from Just Stop Oil and their behavior and what they've been able to get away. We've seen even yesterday in American college football, protesters in California sitting in the middle of the field, disturbing the whole game. I'm all for protest. I think it's a great thing. People should have that right. When it comes to putting people under threat, I'm less happy with it. And especially when people are crazy enough to get onto a big field in a stadium of 30, 20, 50, 5,000 people, or in Wimbledon, 2,000 people on an outside court, and people run onto the court. We've covered that, of course, during the summer. But Andrew, going back just to start off with, this is something that, of course, we discussed on the show. We discussed last year, something that I kind of pushed for, and I thought that it was a good idea. And of course, is the Eastern Promise, Russia moving to Asia, because I did believe that this was the easiest way for Russia to go, that they would eventually be able to go into the east of or into Asia, build, develop, and there's a huge love and affection for Russia in Asia. A lot of countries were behind it. A lot of countries we had interviewed were backing it. They said this is good. They have to do this. They have to go with it, and that they would support them entering into the AFC, the Asian Football Confederation. Now, of course, that didn't come out. Russia had the opportunity to do it, but they didn't vote for it because we know it last year. They were still hoping to get back into UEFA. They were told they would get back into UEFA. They complicated matters by allowing Crimean clubs into the Russian football pyramid. Really muddied the waters. However, There was a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Tell us what happened and how it happened, Alan.
Well, I mean, I think we do need to start at the original decision, which was the sensible thing, as you mentioned at the top of the introduction. And I don't think anybody in their heart of hearts really could have disagreed with it, certainly not at the time. I think as well that the return to UEFA is really, if it could be done sensibly, safely, and safely being the important word there, was always the preferred option, simply because UEFA is by far and away the most high-profile confederation to be part of. It seems a bit strange in a way, doesn't it, that countries can, and it is the truth around the world, it's happened many times, that countries have chosen to change confederations for various reasons. Now, the decision of the Russian Football Union to, well, the debate between should we make that push for Asia. The article you mentioned was a brilliant one. I'm really pleased you wrote that, because I think it made all the right points. I actually do still think that the shorter medium-term option for Russia lies in Asia. Long term, of course, they will always hope to return to UEFA, and quite honestly, I'd say save that card for later. It's just, it doesn't matter whether, there's two very distinct camps in this. There are some who just simply will never, for a very long time, want or accept Russia back into UEFA, and others who will listen to the arguments. And for the time being, I just don't think it's productive to try and push to go back into UEFA. Even if UEFA said, yes, we're going to admit Russian teams at any age group, even if that happened, it is not going to be a smooth ride, whether it's the right decision or not. I mean, we can debate this on one level, whether we think it's the right move, and then whether realistically, on the next level, realistically, is it actually going to work? So I think the next part, what we thought was the light at the end of the tunnel, which was perhaps a bit of common sense, when UEFA at the end of September said, right, okay, we're going to admit the under-17 boys and girls teams into competition again. The way under-17, well, the age group system works, of course, is slightly different. It's not a full 2-year qualifying campaign like it is for the senior sides, because of the players move on so quickly. It wouldn't have involved Russia's men getting involved into the next edition of the FIFA World Cup, because the European Championships for age groups are the qualifiers for the next World Cup. And I think actually that was the right time to consider something like this, because it would take a little of the heat away from the under-17s team if they had entered if they didn't enter a qualifying campaign straight away. As for the girls' side, I think it's the 2024 World Cup is in the Dominican Republic next year. So this is when we thought, okay, this is a compromise, if you like. The boys and girls' sides are, of course, they're not going to have hundreds of thousands of people watching them, and even the locations help. I mean, the Dominican Republic, the boys' edition in Indonesia. Yes, there are a huge amount of fanatical Indonesian fans, but I wouldn't have thought there would be hundreds of thousands of European Western nations travelling to support their under-17 side in the World Cup all the way over there. Straight away, of course, we had the outrage at such a, I believe the exact wording was dangerous and terrifying decision from the Ukrainian football authorities at this, which basically their argument was that, well, this is a slippery slope towards admitting all age group teams, which they were violently against. And for the record, I fully support not readmitting Russia's senior side, at least, into UEFA, for all the reasons you mentioned. I mean, just the risk of the danger, the safety of players, fans, and everything else. England, Poland, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway instantly said as well, we will not play if this decision goes ahead. We will refuse to play. We saw this with the 2022 World Cup qualifiers, when Poland, Czech Republic, and Sweden, I think it was, were due to play the 14 playoff in Russia. Russia were going to host it, and of course they all refused to do that. And before long, of course, UEFA and FIFA relented and said we couldn't find a technical solution. Now, I don't know if you noticed the timing, Alan, of this, when FIFA and UEFA came back with this technical decision. The timing was after qualifying had started. So they could use that as their reason. So they didn't have to get into the whole moral, political reasoning behind it. In a way, actually, that sounds like I'm criticizing them for that. I actually think maybe that's not the worst idea in it, because they are meant to be a footballing organisation. So
yeah, exactly. And look, they have most of the things that sort of I would respect with UEFA and FIFA is that they've kept open a dialogue at all times. For example, with Crimea, there was a push back 2014 to start 2015 to put Crimean clubs into the Russian Football League system. And they basically, within Russian football, there was many people were thinking, well, they should be allowed. They should be allowed. I mean, we can work it out. Look at teams from Northern Ireland playing in the Republic of Ireland. Look at teams in Scotland playing in England, and Wales in England. And so there were a lot of cases for that to happen. But of course, Ukraine had just lost part of its territory. The people chose they don't want to be part of Ukraine anymore. And that was a red rag to a bull. That was going to it was already, they were already attacking their own people. There was, of course, we saw what happened in May in Odessa with people being burnt to death and so on. So basically, that was not good. But UEFA stepped in and said, look, we'll support a Crimean League. Now, for better or worse, the Crimean League exists. A lot of players, again, Alexander Zotov had actually advised on working with the Ukrainian Players Footballers Union and assisted with Crimea. So basically that was working. Then this year, of course, they said, no, we're going to go back in. We're going to go in to Russia. That's it. Now, what people, we did discuss this. I thought it was nobody really in the Russian Football Union backed it. People in Russian football thought this is going to bring down a lot of it's needless hassle on us. So let's try to avoid it.
Yeah.
They didn't. They went ahead because it was politically good. And also it was kind of, well, look, it's already part of Russia. We voted, they voted, clean, done. It just, again, made things look worse. So when this thing came in September, Crimean clubs were already playing in the Russian system. But what people never said was that already Crimean universities and colleges were playing in Russian competitions since last year. So, and nobody batted an eyelid. Mainly because a lot of Ukrainian students were traveling down on scholarships to play. But that had been going on for many years under the National Student Football League. So basically, there was a kind of a give and take. Professional football is a different thing, it's pride and so on. Then, of course, we know what happened then when, as you mentioned, that they started then kicking up holy war. And of course, the likes and people who really are into their sport, which I think is very, very funny. Let's say how do we say? Well, media outlets who have no interest whatsoever in sports, don't cover sports, don't plan to cover sports, don't care about sports, but they got in on the act because it's like, oh, look, we told you. So basically, Voice of America here, they come in. UEFA abandons plan to allow Russian youth teams into European competitions. Again, it was insane, but they were glorying it. They were loving it. They were delighted with it. They were saying, this is great. This is very, very good. And they were happy. And even though they were, they put in that when UEFA, for one reason, was when they had given hosting rights to the 2028 European Championship to the UK and Ireland, the Voice of America said that both of which had their football federations threaten boycotts of games against Russian sides. Not true. Not true. The English FA did. Scotland and Wales, Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland didn't. This again is where media like the Voice of America, which of course we know who they are and where they're from and who backs them and who writes their stories, got it so wrong, but didn't really care. Andrew, what's the next step? Let's just like card on the table. Is Asia the only option now? Because UEFA had done everything they could to make it work. A lot of countries were happy to bring it all back in, but Russia now is stuck playing Kenya, Cameroon, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. They're playing friendly countries. And again, if we look at Asia, we look at Africa, South America, Latin America, they've already, like BRICS, for example, Argentina should be joining unless basically there's a collapse. I think that the runoff of the president, the guy who's leading right now in the presidential election, if he gets in, BRICS is good. If it's the opposition guy, that's it, it's gone. He's the real far-right crazy guy. BRICS, like Brazil have already said that they would play against Russia. South Africa said they play against Russia. India, China, there's no problem there. Argentina have always said they will play against Russia. So is it high time that Russia and the Russian authorities and the Russian Football Federation, most important of all, who are going to have some big changes coming up with them now very, very soon, just in terms of elections and posts and so on, should they pull their necks in and say, listen, we need to go to Asia because UEFA is done? Because if we talk about Israel, for example, Israel left Asia because if they play Arab teams, it's going to be, well, we see what's going on right now.
Yeah. Well, in short, yes. We've had our answer. We've had the attempts, like you mentioned, of UEFA to bridge as gently as they possibly could what is an extremely sensitive, important issue, and the door's been slammed in the face within a month. I don't think any of that entire process has been a surprise. I would have been amazed if there hadn't been an almighty uproar from the countries who have objected in the first place to any participation of Russia in European sport. If they hadn't kicked up a fuss over this decision, the answer's there. If this is what the answer is to under 17s level, well, it's not going to be any different. It would be far worse, far more vociferous if it were for any level higher than that, any age group higher than that. This is something I believe the stance of these countries is going to remain for quite some time, regardless of what happens away from football with the conflict ongoing. So I think Asia is by far and away the only option left. Even if that move were to go through, I would still, of course, be absolutely stunned if that meant any involvement in world competition. But at least continental competition, in theory, if they were to join the AFC, it would be infinitely preferable to, well, I mean, the Russia under-21 side, for example. They are one of the, I would argue, probably the most exciting of Russia's age group sides, including the senior side. There's some phenomenal talents at this level. The previous round of under-21 players were just one of the best under-21 side I'd seen around. They jetted off to Brazil to play club sides. That was their latest international break. I mean, that's only sustainable for a short while, but long term, I mean, not careers will be ruined, but I mean, it's almost, what's the point in fighting your way through club levels? And we are seeing a lot of young players getting their chances in Russian top flight and second tier, unless they get some form of competition. So to answer your question, short, yes, Asia is the option, at least for now. And for who knows? I mean, if you think about it, I'm not surprised why there was a debate between should we try and stick with UEFA or move to the AFC. But then, if you really are brutally honest and look at this situation long term, would it really matter if Russia moved into the AFC long term? I mean, from the club side, it's a much more different issue, of course. If Russian clubs were to, because we were at a stage a few years ago where Russia was the 5th highest ranked league in Europe. We were getting 4 clubs in the Champions League, not performing desperately well in the Champions League, but in the Champions League. We've reported on games. We've watched Liverpool in the Krita Arena. We've watched Weston McKennie somehow score a winner in any football game. But that's the price you'd pay. But other than that, for the international side, I don't see what the desperation to rejoin UEFA should be at this point. Asia is a competitive confederation. Club sides, sure, that's the price you'd pay.
The one thing was that they said that the Russian teams would have to play in neutral venues, neutral countries. They couldn't have their flag, couldn't wear their colours, couldn't listen to their hymn. Now, I like honestly, and I'm saying this as someone who has stood there for my anthem before a fight or before a rugby match or whatever it may be, and sort of stood there proudly, you know. But honest to God, that's only been a couple of times, because most of the time, honestly, you're concentrating on what you're going to do next. It doesn't really matter. When you're getting awarded a medal or something, like, yeah, that's great. That's a nice moment. But are you missing out on something? Not really.
Oh no, seriously, Alan. That little thing. You can't wear your colours. What is the? I still refuse to understand the sheer idiocy of something like that, because it doesn't just achieve nothing. It actively goes against the point you think you're trying to make, because it draws more attention. Are you trying to honestly tell me if we wear a different shirt, a different emblem is played, and a different flag, we don't know who is playing? By doing that, you are highlighting the issue, which makes it even worse. It actively makes the situation far worse. That's one of the things I think UEFA and FIFA should be criticised for, because it's a similar thing to fining somebody for racism. You're washing your hands of the issue. Oh, look, we've done something. You've not done something. You've not just done nothing. You've made it far worse. I mean,
it's a simple thing. Irish rugby teams, when they play abroad, outside of the island of Ireland, they don't play the Irish anthem. Why? Oh, because we have to understand people are all together. But when we're home, then we're not all together. But when we're abroad in a World Cup, we can sing a pop song called Zombie, or we can sing Ireland's Call, which I think overall is not a bad song. It's not a bad tune. The lyrics are nice and so on. It's like standing together and so on. But instead of national anthem, because it might offend some people. So then scrap all national anthems. Scrap the haka. Like last night, the one reason I was so happy to see New Zealand lose, I detest the haka. I don't like the tippy tippy tau or any of the other Pacific Islanders, what they do. No, I'm sorry. It's just wrong. And wrong in the sense of that it's a tradition. If it's so important, because it's no longer about tradition, it's about like cash. And it's now, if it's so important, let them do it in the dressing room beforehand. Let them put say, okay, boys, let's put the hyper doses of caffeine aside. Let's leave the syringes full of painkillers aside. Let's do the haka. Do the haka and piss off. Anyway, one thing that I have to just add that, not about rugby, sorry, I won't rant on that. Ilya Gerkus, friend and former colleague of mine from Lokomotiv Moscow, he put his side back. And he's not an ultra-nationalist. He loves Russia. But remember, this man from St. Petersburg, he has a very, his nationality is mixed, as in like he's different, like ethnic backgrounds from St. Petersburg. So he had people like the Russian president as well, who had direct relatives who died in the blockade and so on, which is a brutal blockade at the start of the Second World War, or when the Second World War came into Russia fully in 1941. And he said, if you turn around and have to not have your flag, not have your anthem, not have your colours, not be called your national name, is there a point in going in? Are those the people that we want to be with? And that was said by Vladimir Zhirinovsky, the late Vladimir Zhirinovsky's son. And they were all saying it. Now you see the true colours. Now you see those people, how they see us. And this is where we're going to the next one, Andrew. So we'll move on very quickly on this, because, of course, we know it happened on October 7th, because, of course, October 7th, nothing had happened before. Same as February 24th, 2022. Nothing had happened before. It basically had just been blank history, blank canvas.
Just out of the blue, of course,
yeah, so there's no reason for like what happened on February 24th, because it just came out of the blue. Same as October 7th. Now, again, we abhor what Hamas did, all they did, regardless of who paid for them, who backed them, whether we know that Israel in 2019, Netanyahu, he used Hamas. I don't care who backed them or conspiracy theories. People died. Full stop. People are continuing to die right now in Palestine. Full stop. Has to stop. Same when people dying in Russia with drone strikes, people dying in. It doesn't matter if it's a soldier or not. I'm sorry. I would always say, like, well, soldier takes a choice. I'm sorry, but like, no one deserves to die for any reason, for oil, for anything. No, die in the ring for glory. Do something you love, but do not. This happened today, or yesterday, the Celtic game with, I think it was Hibernian. So you can see what happened. I was playing this short video. You saw that?
Certainly did.
Okay. Of course, last week playing Athletic Madrid, the Celtic fans were very, very vocal. They brought their banners in, they brought their flags in to show solidarity with Palestine. And this is not support for Hamas. This is not support for death. This is not anti-Semite. This is not against Israel. Of course, the Rangers fans, the way that they put it back around is that they will be waving Israeli flags. Most of them, and I've spoken with a couple of Rangers fans in the last couple of weeks, and two of them involved in Gaelic games, and they're horrified what's happening in Palestine. They don't want people to die. Celtic are going to be fined by UEFA. We do know that in the case of Ukraine, there were flags, like black armbands, there were, moments of silence and so on. Andrew, what's the difference? What is the difference right now going on, in your opinion, in your view of what's happening? Why the difference between these brown people and these white European people?
Which country is more fashionable? I'll be brutally honest. It didn't surprise me in the slightest in a sporting term and outside sport after October 7th that the initial outpouring was all behind one side, which is Israel. And now that is understandable given, of course, where the attack happened, how it happened. There is never any discourse about why things happen. There's never any discourse about the context behind it. People jump on an incident, and that is the entire story because it fits the narrative that they want to push. Now, I don't think many of us, and I certainly don't remember ever saying this, and if I did, then perhaps I should revise my opinions, but I don't remember us wildly complaining about the fact that there were shows of support with Ukrainian flags. Within reason, there were some flags and protests I do remember where they were calling very specifically, there were messages written in the crowd demanding, send us F-16, send us fighter jets, send us this, that, and the other. That's where I would draw the line, personally. It's not about which country you sympathise with. Where you're calling for killing and war, that's where it should stop. Which country you wish to show sympathies for? I don't think you should stop people from doing that. That is what I think free speech is. And yet, now to find a club find a club for their fans showing support for a people who it actually is becoming clear that a vast majority of the world are actually showing more sympathy now than I remember seeing in my lifetime. And it has been a lifetime of conflict in the Middle East for Palestinians. I don't think anybody in their right mind would say it is an immoral thing to say, I don't think 2.3 million people forcibly being ejected from their homes, cut off in every single sense from food, water, health, aid, connectivity with the rest of the world, and most importantly of all, their lives in many cases, showing support for that, how that can be immoral, I just don't know. What is far too convenient is how people conflate a people and a group that is linked to represent in some way those people. Those are two different things. What Hamas have done, their approach is, you can't justify the killing of innocent people. You can never justify that, just like you mentioned. But Palestinian people haven't been pushing for the slaughtering and eradication of an entire other race or nation, just like I would assume most Israeli people, if not all Israeli people, are not saying we want to wipe out and destroy all Palestinian people. Conflicts happen between groups that some people may or may not support, but the people are not the ones fighting. The innocent people on the ground are not the ones who deserve to suffer. And people supporting those people should also not, well, it's not suffering, but should not be punished for showing that support. The other angle, I would say, to sum up, would be if this issue of iconography, of support, is so problematic, in a way, I would understand if it is just simply too complicated, because the lines get blurred when messages get added, when literally messages written and the message becomes twisted, becomes conflated between a people and a group or an individual. Perhaps the safest thing is just say nothing whatsoever. No flags whatsoever. No representation. No political statements. And officially, when we have statements from UEFA officials, FIFA officials, they always trot out the same old cliche: sport and politics should never mix. It's like, well, forget whether it should, it does. And it always will. And I don't necessarily disagree with that as a concept. It is always intertwined. It is, you can't separate them completely. But how you treat fans showing their support, their freedom of speech, as long as that is not inciting hatred or racism or issues that go beyond your opinion, then I think it's complicated.
And just to come in on that, I've heard them at protests or rallies or marches, whatever you want to call them. I've heard them, the people who were waving a Palestinian flag. Some were waving flags of jihad. Some were shouting death to Jews, kill the Jews, from the river to the sea, all these kind of things. There are people who are not Muslim who will join in on this. There are people who are Muslim who will join in on this because they're severely damaged people, because they're the same in the Israeli, Zionist or Jewish community who will do the same, kill all Arabs, calling them unhuman animals. Now, where have we heard all these things before? Where have we heard all these things that they're barbarians? They're barbarians. They're not like us. They're not. We've heard it said that they're not like kind of this week. Politicians saying, oh, they're not like us, as in fair-skinned, white-skinned. We've heard the same with Russia. We both have kids, half Russian kids, and for me, it's an extremely difficult listen when I hear politicians from Europe, or I hear talking heads from Europe, or grifters from Europe or America, and they're joining in with some people who basically have little less to do at the times. They're online, or they're like bots, or they're paid to do things. They're extremely hateful, damaged, sick individuals, calling Russian people orcs, Mongoloid race, barbarians, uncivilized, that they were not only eating dogs but having sex with dogs, that they were they could only fight with shovels. They were like, that's all that was left. The same thing we saw again, that the Hamas were going in and chopping people's heads off with shovels. The same kind of narrative and playbook that we've been listening to for a year and a half or longer, now coming in here. And yet when people start to go, wait, hold on, this is not right. And people rightfully, while Russia can stand up for itself, many of these people can't. But there are those people who will jump in on the grift, who will jump in and add in their hateful tones with, again, anti-Semite and Islamophobic, racist. So that has to be acknowledged. There's no two ways about it. People will latch onto this. But again, as you said, they're groups within the mass. And it's up to the mass not to follow that. Because again, I was very happy to see in Ireland, many different cities, love to see in London, cities in England, in America, where people were standing together and saying no. And I spoke with my mom about this, and it was an interesting one, where we lived the first 3.5 years of my life in the Jewish quarter of Dublin. So our doctor was Dr. Bratman. Our neighbours were Jewish. There was a synagogue down the road, which I think it's now a mosque. So there you go, it's sign of times. My mom said, funnily, she said, oh, I used to love on a Sunday, when everything was closed in Ireland at the time, going to the little Jewish bakery on the corner and going in and buying the bread there. And my mom said it was great bread. Now, of course, I made a joke. I said that means now you have to tell my brother and sister they have, like, you know, because the whole joke of like Jews putting the blood of Christian kids into the bread. I said, now my mom was like, oh, they never did that. And I've got, Mom, I know they didn't. That's a joke. But anyway, yeah. But you know, the whole thing was, but my mom said they should not be bombing. As my mom said, bombs don't have an aim on them. They just land where they land. They might have landed in the right place. They might be deflected off by air defenses, and they kill people. And we've seen it. Yeah. We've seen it both ways. We've seen it both ways, and we've seen it in Ukraine both ways. So it is a moment. On the things of for example, with the protests and people with the should be having the freedom of expression, the right to protest, or the freedom to express themselves, not as assholes, not as racist, not as bad-thinking people. But one began with this, with one guy saying he was kicked out of Liverpool, out of Anfield, for wearing clothing that said, you know, Free Palestine or Justice for Palestine. So again, he said he'd been thrown out for the Europa League on Thursday night. They said that the club had said no Israeli, no Palestinian flags, that this is not to the flag policy. This was just basically that they were trying to keep things down. And of course, everyone's writing the Celtic fan group, defy club, defy club, defy club. But Liverpool have been very, very good. One guy came in with like Free Palestine, even though he's told not to do this. You know, he defied it. And he said, now, again, this was like very, very funny. So, you know, the club I endorse since 5 has broken me. I'm sorry, shut up. It's not, if you support from since 5, you're just basically investing into a company. That's what you're doing. If you go to the match, you invest in a company. That's what Liverpool are. Look who their owners are. Look where they make their money. That's who they are. It's a company. He said, I found it very odd our fans were allowed to stand with Ukraine and bring those flags in, as well as the club itself selling Liverpool, well, like Ukraine merchandise in the club shop. But then I held up a Palestine flag during You'll Never Walk Alone. A bunch of stewards rushed me like I had a weapon on me. When I was escorted out, the flag was grabbed out of my hand and I was told to take the hoodie off or leave the club. Now, again, when we look at that, we kind of go, okay, fair enough. You were warned, you were asked not to do it, but you still went ahead and do it. And this was blown up by a lot of people saying, oh, look at Liverpool is so bad. And I as well said, well, what do you expect? What do you expect from Liverpool? So it's not in a bad way. Most clubs, their businesses, that's what they do. But then another thing came out then a little bit later, which was actually kind of funny, in a way that was extremely sad, that really was pushed under the carpet, was a Jewish fan who was told to remove a banner that was mourning the deaths of Israeli fans. Okay? So he had this out, again, brought it in, showed that they had died. If they had died or not, we don't know. But he had said, like, for God's sake, save Gaza. Well, it was another one, but they weren't visible during the game. So basically, all this was going on at the time. Okay, so there was like the Jewish ones, the Palestinians, and for clubs, should not be put in place like this. But again, where, as I said, if they're allowed to have Ukrainian flags, then why not? If Liverpool are raising funds for Ukraine by selling merchandise, again, that's branding, that's money come back to the club as well. Don't forget about that. That's the club will make money off that. But again, this is a very strange kind of way to show it. And then it got worse. It kept growing. And this is what happens. There's a race to the bottom with all these horrible things. Of course, you wouldn't be surprised at the Daily Mail that have to get their word in. Okay, and this is so funny. And this made me laugh a lot. This will be something you might want to do during the week for news. So this one, Israeli Liverpool fan gets his tattoo of their crest blacked out and replaced by a Star of David while crossing out never from their motto, "You'll walk alone," after club ban tribute to fans murdered by Hamas. Now, again, this is like, for me, it's like, here we go. So, "You never walk alone." This is his artwork, his ink being done. And, fair play to him. Fair play to him for doing this. Oren Sensel, good man. You're supporting him 45 years. I'm sure that you've had lots of great times with the club, because the time you started supporting, they were actually one of the top in Europe and one of the best clubs in the world. So you basically jumped onto a bandwagon. Well done to you. And it was even before Ronnie started playing, Ronnie Rosenthal, of course, the guy who could hit or miss very badly. Sometimes
miss very badly, usually.
Yeah, most of it. Final word on this, Andrew. It's very difficult for us to watch all this unfurl, watch this develop, because it's very painful to watch it when you see, you see children dying in Israel, people dying in Israel. You see little kids being dragged out of rubble. You see little kids just in sheer shock and panic. It's heartrending. It's absolutely heartrending. I spoke to a friend of ours, Matt, on Friday, and just he's still affected by looking at some of the images that he had to do for his job, to go through them and kind of go, it's really affected me. I know a former colleague of mine, Albina, a wonderful teacher, very, very educated girl. She basically can't sleep now because basically this is all in her head. We've had COVID, before the climate crisis, COVID, we've had war, now we have this. It's just never ending, and the media are feeding into it. Do you think a sport can play any real part in this? Do you think sport can actually make this better? Because Israeli clubs can't play anywhere. Just, like, people have left Israel. Robbie Keane and his guys, they left. I also know some other basketball players who left as well, because they were told by their agents it's not safe there, so they've left. They've broken a contract. The clubs have been very, very good, very, very good. Broke the contracts and left. One's gone to Turkey, one's gone to Spain. Can sport play a role in this, or are we just going to have to wait and play this out and then allow Israel to come back into, as I say, the world order, Andrew?
I would love to say yes, sport can, and sorry, let me rephrase that. Sport can, but it won't, or it won't be allowed to. I don't necessarily think for all the wrong reasons there. It's just the atmosphere right now. I would even go as far to say that the global modern trend of dissecting every letter of every word that is spoken without properly understanding or considering the context, the intention with which it is said, every little colour of, I mean, we saw, I believe it was Alicia Keys, the singer. She was wearing a jacket that happened to have one or two of the four colours on the Palestinian flag, and she was accused of supporting Palestine because, I mean, yes, there was a message behind her social media post, but they picked up on the colours, two colours. It wasn't even like she was wearing a flag. The minutiae with which things are dissected, you're never going to avoid outrage in some department, and people have seen what outrage can achieve: disruption. It can influence opinions on many different levels. So this current situation, I say this current situation, like you mentioned, it's a never-ending cycle. I mean, it sounds absolutely horrific and horrible, but how many people right now are thinking about the thousands who have died in Sudan, in Khartoum? Thousands. More than have died in Israel and Palestine over the last war, and it's been called a war. How many people are even thinking of that? How many people are thinking of the number of school children in Nigeria that are abducted by militias that missing? Even, I mean, yeah, this is
abducted, missing. Yeah, abducted, missing.
But I mean, look, this is the point. It's an ongoing cycle. It's never going to end. So if we say and accept, which I think we're probably going to have to, given the realities of how decisions are made, if we accept that, look, sports can't function in this atmosphere and environment, when is sport going to be able to function and be accepted? I mean, next week, I say next week flippantly, and it sounds awful to be flippant, and it is awful to be flippant, but it's the reality. I can't be any different. Next week, there could be an eruption of tensions in Central America. We've seen the last week in Mexico. The last 2 weeks, we've seen dozens and dozens of police murdered and dumped by the side of the road. Gang warfare rampant. Well, okay, it could. The next time it could be. We've heard about tensions in different parts of the world. China and Taiwan is an issue that's been ongoing for a long time. Anywhere could explode at any moment. And then again, we're going to come back to the same conversation. Can sport solve it? Well, in theory, yes, because it is a vehicle for people to express their opinions. And I think that is sport's most powerful measure. Of course, stating the obvious, it should be within reason, and reason being not inciting hatred, not objectifying and glorifying violence and death and awful things that should never happen to any innocent person. That's stating the obvious. But as a vehicle for showing what people really think, this is one of the few remaining places that, in theory, can remain unedited. I mean, when you look on a computer screen, on any screen nowadays, one of my biggest worries and fears for the present and the future is I'm not entirely sure if my own opinion is mine, because how we absorb information, how do you guarantee who has allowed that information, fed that information towards you and presented it to you in a certain way, and therefore clearly influences what you think? You can't be sure what your opinion is anymore. I genuinely think one of the few places, if not the only place, is in a crowd of thousands, and it can be negative or positive. I fully understand that. But in theory, it is where you can show support and people will realize and understand that not all bodies, entities, individuals, organizations represent the people they are in theory connected with. And that is a critical distinction to make. I live in Russia. I have done for a long time, and I love this country. It does not mean I love every part of it. I am from England. I was born there, and I have fond memories of so many things. I love England, but it doesn't mean I love everything about England. And that's fine. That's what people need to understand. That's fine. Every country has good and bad parts. Every sport has good and bad parts. But if you don't allow some platform of expression, we're done for. We're finished. We might as well just give up and just say, okay, hand it all over to AI-generated reality and just sit on our arseholes all day.
On the very last thing, we've just got a couple of minutes to go on this. Bobby Charlton, of course, passed away. Second last of the 1996 World Cup winning team. Jeff Hurst is the last person still alive on the team. Again, as a player, he was second. Some people would always class him as one of the greats, overshadowed by the players he played with, but still the amount of goals he got from midfield, his consistency, his dedication, everything about him, like as a representative of football, of England, Manchester United especially. You've got 60 seconds to say, before we play out on a lovely video, what made Bobby Charlton Manchester United?
The qualities and the ethics and understanding the very heart of the club and what it meant, for me, makes him Mr. Manchester United. He was a perfect gentleman, but he never for 1 second dropped his standards of the club. He was still coming into dressing rooms, talking to youth team players, talking about just how much he loved. I saw an interview with him this week where he said, the best thing about being an executive director is I get to go to all the games. And as soon as he walks into a dressing room, instantly there is respect. There is a standard to be upheld to, and he felt honoured and privileged to represent Manchester United. And passing on that message by example, by words, by a lifetime of commitment to the club, other generations of players will understand what it should mean to represent a shirt, to represent the club, because you always got the sense, and he wasn't universally loved, it must be pointed out. He's famously part of the Holy Trinity: George Best, Dennis Law, and Bobby Charlton. He and George Best didn't always necessarily get on. George Best was the flashy lifestyle, but he was a teammate. And when he was on the pitch, where sport shows you universally, he led by example. And if you can't lead by example, if you cannot be inspired by an example like that, then you need to switch off. There's no hope for you.
And I'd now say, Andrew Flynn, thank you very much. And thanks for a brilliant contribution today. And again, we're very, very openly speaking about things that could probably get us into trouble, but at least we're being honest and straight about it as well. And in honor of Bobby Charlton, we're going to play out with a nice video put together by FIFA to show his prowess, not just in front of goal, but around the goal, around the field as well. This is a man who basically could score goals. Same as his brother Jack as well, who died not long ago as well. Terrific footballer. Guys who grew up, and of course they grew up because their mom was a footballer as well. Sissy, she basically bred it into them. So we'll say goodbye for now and wish you all a very, very good week. We'll hope that the world will see sense that there will be a ceasefire in Palestine, that there will be a ceasefire in progress in Ukraine, and that basically people will start to, talk with each other just as we did tonight. So until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.